Marco Rubio folded up a little note, handed it to Trump. Trump opened up the note.
I think it was like, go back to the guy from Chevron.
And Trump just read it out loud straight because those parts of his brain just aren't working anymore. But if you're Stephen Miller, you hand him a note and you say, take over Greenland. Or you hand him a note and you say, white people only. Or you hand him a note and you say, let's shut down the Fed. And Trump goes, am I going to get credit for that?
I'm Joanna Coles. This is the Daily Beast podcast, and I'm so excited to bring the conversation. I've just had a rousing conversation with David Rothkopf, who just lists everything that is going on right now. And it's as if Donald Trump has tried to erase the entire 20th century. And we take a fascinating wandering by the way about what it was actually like working with Bill Clinton when you knew he was having all these extracurricular romantic sexual activities. David worked for the Clinton administration. He was also the editor of Foreign Policy magazine, and he just brings such a clear, frankly, bomb-throwing perspective on what's going on right now. I can't wait for you to join us and for us to get into it. David Rothkopf, where do we begin? I mean, is it Iran, Venezuela, Minneapolis, Jerome Powell, Trump staring vacantly out of the window, Trump trying not to grab Carolyn Levitt? I want to grab Carolyn Levitt, but not for the same reasons, I think. Where do we begin, David? How bad is it?
We talk periodically, and I think one of the
We're talking more frequently.
No, I know. I like it. I'm not complaining. But what I'm saying is, I think we have to say that the decline of Donald Trump is accelerating, right? I mean, we sometimes people talk about like late stage capitalism. Mm-hmm. We're in late stage Donald Trump.
This guy Donald Trump, that's good.
Losing it. And, we saw it like last week. He had a meeting of oil executives, which, by the way, went terribly badly for him. But in the middle of the meeting, he gets up, wanders over to the window, stares out at his ballroom, starts talking about the ballroom. When he did the Venezuela announcement of his big triumph in Venezuela, in the middle of the thing, he starts talking about sending troops into the streets. He can't hold a thought in his head between his ears for more than 5 seconds at a time. He looks completely lost, and yet at the same time, the people around him are taking advantage of the mental vacancy between his ears and pushing forward their extreme agendas faster than ever. Going after the Fed, going after ICE in the streets, going after Greenland, attacking NATO, doing things that would have been considered crazy, inconceivable, instantly impeachable offenses. And they're doing it all at once because Trump is just there going, where am I? He's lost.
I shouldn't be laughing, but if we can't laugh, we're going to cry. So he's a useful idiot, not only for the Russians, but for Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller.
Well, look, the perfect example is that during the meeting with the oil execs to get them to congratulate him on giving them Venezuela, and by the way, over the weekend on Truth Social, what did Donald Trump do? He showed his new title of acting president of Venezuela.
Oh, I missed that. He actually put that out there.
On Truth Social, that he's the acting president of Venezuela, which I thought was cuckoo. But you get an idea of how the Trump administration is currently working because Marco Rubio folded up a little note, handed it to Trump. Trump opened up the note, and he's like, your fly is open. The note said something, it was just like the guy down the hall,
I think it was like, go back to the guy from Chevron.
Right. The guy from Chevron wants to say something.
Yeah.
And Trump just read it out loud straight because those parts of his brain just aren't working anymore. But if you're Stephen Miller, you hand him a note and you say, take over Greenland, or you hand them a note and you say white people only, or you hand them a note and you say let's shut down the Fed, and Trump goes, am I going to get credit for that? And that's where we are.
Or if you're Stephen Miller, you say, send another 3,000 ICE agents into Minneapolis. Let's double down.
Nobody is saying no to him on these things. And, Kristi Noem, she certainly doesn't know what she's doing. I mean, she was on the Sunday shows and, she couldn't come up with a defense. They put out a video of this shooting incident, which they said proves this woman was, an attacker. And it proved the opposite. It proved that she was just somebody's mom driving the minivan with kids' toys in the back street down the street when some unhinged ICE thug fired 3 shots into her face and killed her. And so you've got extremists and incompetents working hand in hand to produce the worst possible policies in the worst possible way.
And also, if you don't agree with them, you really have to deal with a lot of hassles. So we suddenly have Jerome...
Hassles.
But I was just thinking about it from Jerome Powell's point of view. I'm not sure he ever thought he would put a video out on social media saying that he was facing charges from the Department of Justice.
Well, who would have ever thought that would happen? But just to take the first half of your comment where you said if you don't agree with them. So here's Trump coming back from, whatever happens at Mar-a-Lago, wherever he is on the weekend, where they inject him with sheep placentas or whatever they do to keep him, awake at night. And somebody asked him about the shooting in Minneapolis and said, was deadly force appropriate? And Trump's response was what? He said, well, they were very disrespectful.
It's
disrespect. Is that again? That's a shooting offense in the United States now. You get the death penalty for being disrespectful to Donald Trump, right? And Jerome Powell did the only thing he could do. The president, the Justice Department is the injustice department, and it's the obstruction of justice department, and it will do whatever Trump wants. And it is undertaking this investigation, which is completely, made up charges about, construction on a Fed building that nobody ever cared about that had cost overruns, which, by the way, is pretty rich in the middle of Trump illegally renovating the White House to the tune of hundreds of
400 million, I think the price tag is now. Right.
Guaranteed. We can have a little running bet here. Guaranteed it costs $1 billion. Guaranteed, right? But anyway, he goes after Jerome Powell, and Jerome Powell, who actually has a sense of responsibility, despite the fact, parenthetically, and here you and I know something Trump doesn't know, Trump appointed Jerome Powell, right? Right.
He's forgotten that. He's forgotten that.
I don't even remember that.
I mean, he should really keep going. Jerome Powell should just keep saying, as when you appointed me, Mr. President, you told me to.
Yeah, he should, although I'm not sure he's so proud of that. But in any event, Jerome Powell feels a sense of responsibility towards the U.S. economy. And so he has to point out that the reason that he is being attacked has to do with his independence, has to do with him following the oath of office he took and the responsibilities that his agency has been given, which is to look at the facts and not to succumb to political pressure.
That thing of flooding the zone, they're certainly flooding the zone. How would you judge the beginning of 2026 against last year?
The floodgates are open. I mean, it took them a little while to get going last year. And they were they started out with Elon. I remember that, that's what we were talking about at the beginning. And we were doing,
Well, there was Doge, and then Elon spun out in April, I think, right? So he was in and out.
That was a flop. And they started doing different parts of Project 2025. And they did a lot of damage over the course of that time in the big ugly bill and so forth. But here, it's January, 11th or something like that, 12th.
Who knows? It feels as if we've had a year in the first 10 days.
Right. And what have we had? We've said we've invaded Venezuela. The president has declared that we're going to run it forever. He's taken over the country. He's declared himself the acting president. He's threatened Colombia. He's threatened Cuba. Over the weekend, I don't know if you noticed this, but Trump also said he'd be happy if Marco Rubio were the new president of Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
They've said we are going into England. We're not contemplating it. Trump has said if NATO stands up to us, well, I'm not so sure we even need NATO. So bad as it is that he's willing to attack a NATO ally, he's now saying he doesn't even know that we need NATO. And he's sent troops into, Minneapolis, ramped them up. They're killing people. When they kill innocent people, the administration's response to that, and it's the president and Kristi Noem and Tom Homan, all of them, and J.D. Vance, all saying, hey, we did the right thing. We don't accept anything wrong here. If you mess with ICE people, if you protest ICE, then this is gonna happen to you, contrary to, I don't know, the First Amendment of the Constitution.
Right, and J.D. Vance said, that the ICE agent had total immunity.
Total immunity.
I mean, even Tom Homan didn't say that. Tom Homan said, let's just have the investigation.
Yeah. But by the way, there's a nice little exchange there when they said in the Sunday show, so did you steal $50,000? And he's like, well, it wasn't $50,000, which
right.
I thought was a
and
really...
it wasn't this was Tom Homan being offered a payment for something, and it was in a bag of Doritos, right?
Exactly.
Because he looks like he could be a Dorito guy.
Look.
Who isn't a Dorito guy? Let's be honest.
Let's not go after the Dorito eaters in your audience. Because I'm done. Because I like a nice.
I was going to say I like a Dorito, and also
Yeah.
you can't do that thing with Doritos where you only eat half a bag, because it's you versus 20,000 food scientists who've engineered this thing to set your body on fire.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not against it. Life is short. No.
Life is short. I could make a terrible joke there. I'm not going
to fight the Dorito impulse, particularly given everything that we're saying here.
Right.
I mean, seriously. If you're not sitting there with your hand in a bag of Doritos as the president's going, let's shut down the Fed's independence. I'm going to put my own puppet in charge of the place. And, and next week we have to deal with the opening of the Melania movie. Oh, my God.
Well, I'm assuming you're taking a big group of friends to see it, David.
I was hoping you would go with me to see the Melania.
I think we should. I want to do a watch party. The complexity is it opens first in movie theatres, though I mentioned on Saturday that someone had been at a theatre when a trailer came up and everybody in the audience started booing it.
I think the Daily Beast should buy a block of tickets, buy out the theater, sell tickets.
We should
and
totally
it should
do
turn
that.
it into the kind of Rocky Horror Picture Show where people are shouting at the screen at certain points.
And we should ask people to dress as Melania and Donald.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should totally do that.
Now you're talking. That would be an event. And people everywhere would start going to the Melania movie as a way of protesting.
Oh, that's a very good idea. Yes, that's a very good idea. The Melania protest. Yes, excellent.
Yeah, let's see it. I mean, nothing could be more horrifying. Anyway.
Well, we should just ask people to write in. Send us your suggestions for how we would protest using the Melania movie as a focal point. I sense this audience will have really smart ideas for it.
Yeah, I sense they will. Have you watched the trailer?
Of course I've watched the trailer. I've watched it on repeat. I have it on a loop in my office, David.
And she turns to the camera and it begins, she says, here we go again.
Yes, here we go again. And then he said, did you watch it? Did you watch it? And she goes, I will see it on television news. But she won't see it on certain television news. She won't see it on CBS. Or maybe CBS will now have it on a loop.
I love your Melania impression. But
Thank you, David. Thank you for complimenting my Melania impression. First Lady. It's happening. happening. It's happening. We are all losing our minds. We are
We
losing
are.
our minds here.
That's
It's an
why-
absolute shit show.
That's why it is so important to maintain your Dorito intake
I
throughout
think-
this, because otherwise your
I
blood
think so.
sugar will fall off and you can't handle it. But that
I
answers your
can't
question.
handle it. And,
I mean,
can we just say props to Nikki Glaser for a shout out against CBS News, given that it was on CBS.
she did a shout out against CBS News.
Yes, she
did
said,
a shout
yeah.
out. She said
you saw it,
see
you saw
more
it.
BS.
Yeah.
She's right. So she did a swipe at CBS. She did a swipe at the Epstein list.
Yep.
Not only making a reference to the fact that best editing would go to the Justice Department for editing it, but also to all the A-listers who were actually on the list, which was a bit of a dig at
Well,
the
and then
people
they
in
flashed
the room.
to Bill Maher.
The only thing that I will deny is that Bill Maher is a comedian. The dude is not funny, and enough is enough.
Enough is enough. As Wanda Sykes said, she was
as
like, less,
Wanda
dude.
Sykes said.
Less. Yeah. Wanda
Sykes
Sykes was on form. I felt like after a quiet year last year where nobody did any politics, we're now going back to embracing Hollywood's wilder side.
That's a really good point. I'd like to disagree with you. No. I was happy to see Nikki Glaser say something. I was happy to see Wanda Sykes say something. I was happy that on the red carpet, Jean Smart said something going in about, this is what we've got to do, as to stand up for our decency as a country. But the vast majority of people say nothing. And here we are talking about, when I look at what Donald Trump is doing right now, eliminating social progress that we've made on racial issues, on gender issues, on the international community, on getting rid of our alliances, on how we treat our neighbors, on going backwards on environmental progress, on getting rid of the independence of the Fed. One by one, and this, I'm not exaggerating here, one by one, Donald Trump is eliminating all of the major strides that the United States has made in the past 125 years.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel, someone said to me yesterday, it feels as if he is trying to erase the 20th century, as if it just didn't happen.
That was me, by the way.
Oh, that was you. Well, it's a very, very good line.
And I'm glad it was such
you.
a memorable experience for you.
It's such a good line. It's as if he's trying to erase the 20th century.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of writing a column for the Daily Beast that said
That's
that.
where I read it. But I think we had that conversation. We actually, or maybe it was a text exchange.
But that's what he's doing. It was a text exchange.
Yeah,
but
it was a
he
text
is
exchange.
trying to erase the 20th century.
Yeah.
And go back. One of the weirdest things, truly, that has happened, and it's pretty destructive. Somebody at some point between Trump presidency 1 and Trump presidency 2 was sitting at Mar-a-Lago, having whatever you have at Mar-a-Lago, and he said, "You know who you should emulate, Donald?" And Trump goes, "Who? What does emulate mean?" And
It's not the same as immolate.
President William McKinley. And Trump goes, "Well, why?" And, they go, "Well, he had tariffs. You like tariffs." And he's like, "Oh, that's great." And he was president during the Gilded Age. And Trump's like, "Yeah, the Gilded Age. That sounds good. I like to gild things." And he went out and he started conquering the world. The United States was taking things over again.
Yep.
And Trump's like, "Yeah." And so Trump, several times since, has said, "I want to be like a great president like William McKinley." And that was, the end of the 19th century. And everything since William McKinley, Trump's eliminating. Social progress, racial progress, international progress, America's growth in the world,
Civil
America's
rights.
standing in the world. What the person neglected to tell Trump was how the story ended for William McKinley, which was he was assassinated.
He was assassinated. Yep.
Right.
Well, that's not going to happen to Donald Trump because he is building his beautiful ballroom, and it's going to have, he said, 4-inch thick bulletproof glass, so they can have the full inauguration there, despite the fact one of the great things about America is we have the inauguration outside where we can see your crowd size.
But you know what else happened in the past week? Just another story in this same vein, because the beautiful ballroom, crazy thing that it is. There's a G20 summit coming in June, and the G20 summit now is going to have to reschedule some of its key events. Why? Because Donald Trump has scheduled on his birthday an outdoor UFC match on the south lawn of the White House. And so this whole international, summit of the leading countries of the world is going to have to reschedule its critical meetings in order that there could be a wrestling match outdoors on the south lawn of the
Come
White
on,
House.
David, wouldn't you rather, be honest, wouldn't you rather watch a UFC live wrestling match on the grounds of, maybe even on the Mar-a-Lago patio at the White House, than sit around with 20 global leaders, chatting away about climate change and stuff that, it just sounds, it sounds boring. Donald Trump doesn't want to have to do that. Imagine those summits, the G7, the G8, the G20. Nobody knows the difference between any of them. They've been talking about the same stuff for the last 20 years.
Melania's been talking about G-spot. What is that? I don't know. The G20. None of it matters to me.
None of it matters. But UFC, Dana White's a friend. He's on the board of Facebook, strangely but truly.
But UFC, the head of the Department of Education.
So I don't find that surprising, and I'm with the president of finding the idea of a live UFC match more interesting than the G20.
Well,
also, you'll have all those translators. It will make it difficult to listen to. You'll have the Finnish guy that you don't recognize, even when he's sitting right opposite you.
Even though he's been kissing your ass and he's the only world leader you like.
I can't do a Finnish accent. Can you do a Finnish accent?
No.
Well, you didn't even try. What was that? You didn't even try.
After listening to your impressions on this podcast, I'm leaving that to you.
I feel like it'll be Russian. It'll be Russian or maybe a little bit of Swedish in there. I'm not sure I can do a Finnish accent. I'm going to practice it for next time. But you're right. So 20 world leaders asked to reschedule because there's a live fight.
All of this goes back to your prior question, which is, how's 2026 going so far?
Right.
And the point is, in the past 2 weeks, to not even 2 weeks, all this insanity has been compressed. And all you can do is just say, well, are we going to have more of this? Is it going to happen faster? And then you look at Trump and you say, he doesn't know where he is. He is out of control. The people around him are in a feeding frenzy. The Democrats in Congress are sitting there trying to figure out what adjective they can put in their angry note, to say, oh, we are super disappointed.
It reminds me of when you do something really bad and your parents call you in and they go, we're very disappointed in you. We're very disappointed. And you're like, good, I'm going to do it again. What are the Democrats doing? What are they doing, David?
Well, most of the Democrats, and certainly the congressional Democrats, are doing, as we say in my part of New Jersey, bupkis, which is to say nothing. They're not doing anything. But there are the occasional stories. There is a new mayor in New York. Just the past couple of days, he's announced a new program to do universal child care. He's announced a new program to deal with, to build toilets outside. He's doing some things to save money. And in other words, I think there's some Democrats that are doing things that will be politically resonant, that will matter later this year. Over the weekend, what's her name? Mary Petola, the congresswoman from Alaska, announced she's running for the Senate. Now, this was a safe Senate seat. And it was like a plus 13 Trump seat. And so for her to do the math and say, I think I'm going to run for the Senate instead of my good, safe House seat, suggests that Trump is in trouble. And, frankly, what I would like to see the Democrats do is focus on winning as many House seats and as many Senate seats as they can. We don't have to have a star. We don't have to have a big leader in the party. What we need is for Trump to lose control of the House and or the Senate so that we can stop this madness. Because prior to that, it's going to be very hard to do.
So, David, do you think for the midterms, the Democrats' ideas should all be local? I mean, we keep hearing that it's a wide tent, and you've got Mamdani in New York, and then you've got the moderates, Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger in New Jersey and Virginia, respectively. I mean, we had Congressman Seth Moulton on the podcast last week, and he was saying there is no national leader of the Democrats. Do we not need, well, is there no need for one right now? Because the thing that Trump does so effectively is crystallize the Republican message.
I think there is a need for leadership. I don't know that there is a need for a particular leader. I think there is a need for certain principles of leadership. And among those principles of leadership are to stand up to Trump, to fight back. The people who are making problems, not just for Democrats, but for the country, are the ones who are like, well, let's meet them halfway. Let's try to come up with a compromise. Let's try to see the good in them. I was watching this over the weekend where there were a couple of people going, well, we don't have the full story yet on what happened in Minneapolis with shooting this woman. It's like, what are you talking about? We have seen it from 5 different angles. We know exactly what happened. There was no grounds whatsoever to shoot that woman in the face 3 times. Okay?
And she was unarmed. I mean, she was unarmed.
And she posed no threat to this guy. And the guy was, clearly unhinged. And the Democrats who do that, who give a little bit, who normalize, give license to Trump. And so those people are doing damage. So when we establish the principles for Democratic leaders, one of them is, let's stop trying to meet a fascist halfway. Let's stand up for what our values are. And let's be clear in how we communicate them. Let's not go into Chuck Schumer stories about a made-up family and some kind of thing that happened in Queens once that take us away from the core issue. Our fundamental rights are being threatened. Our economy is being threatened. People aren't going to be able to pay for their health care. The environment is being destroyed. Our standing in the world is being destroyed. We're about to blow up NATO. We're about to blow up the Fed. These are simple things that can be communicated simply. And AOC is communicating it simply, but so is J.B. Pritzker. There are people, Abigail Spanberger, we talk about how Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill and Zoran Mandami or Michelle Wu, they're all in different places. But on core issues like people should have their health care taken care of, we shouldn't destroy the environment, we should have fairer taxes for people, we shouldn't have ICE in the streets killing innocent citizens. There are a lot of issues in which all Democrats agree. So let's be clear, let's communicate that, and then let's focus on how do you win individual elections.
I mean, many people point out that, in fact, President Obama actually deported way more people than Donald Trump is deporting or has deported. I think he did a total of 3 million people deported back to South American countries, largely where they came from, but chose not to make any political capital out of it, just went on quietly. Do you think Democrats want to return to that? How do they handle the immigration issue? And is this a sort of tipping point for Donald Trump in terms of it becoming, I mean, it was something he basically won the election on, closing the borders. Has it now tipped to a point where this is a negative issue for Republicans?
Well, it is, because, I mean, he was doing pretty well on the southern border, and he shut down the southern border, and people were like, okay. And you weren't going to get a lot of Democrats pushing back on that. It was very clear because, frankly, people want secure borders. But when he then said, I'm going to turn ICE into my own Gestapo and send it into American cities and round up innocent people and shoot mothers in the face and tear daddies away from their family. I mean, I saw a story over the weekend where they deported somebody who was in a vegetative state, who away from his family. Well,
they couldn't protest. They couldn't protest.
But they couldn't protest. But I mean, this is a vile, despicable behavior that's also extra legal, and the courts are against it and so forth. And the people are against it. And so he's losing ground. This was one of his few. What were his issues? Immigration and the economy. Where has he lost the most ground? Immigration and the economy. And Republicans, gradually, this year is going to be about them waking up and going, holy shit, the guy's losing his mind. He's 79 years old. He doesn't have a lot of political clout. I've sold my soul to the devil for this guy. How do I back out of this? How do I find a new position on this?
Well, aren't you going to? We're already beginning to see Republicans at the perhaps beginning of standing up to him. You had the group that joined with the Democrats to say you can't send in armed troops to Venezuela.
So you had 5 people in that. You had a number of people in the Epstein files. Let's release the Epstein files. Now, the administration, by the way, was supposed to have released them a month ago. They've released a fraction of them. We're still a long way from getting it. But there was a group there. You're starting to see some peeling away in the corporate community. I thought one of the interesting punchlines of that oil meeting was that one of the companies that they specifically named as having had their assets taken by the Venezuelans was Exxon. And Exxon went to the meeting and said, I don't know if we really want to invest in Venezuela. And this really pissed off Trump. And Trump said, well, I don't know that we want Exxon to invest in Venezuela. But you're starting to have corporates go, how close do we want to be to this guy as he melts down? How do we protect our interests in the long run? And I think that process, as you're looking at 2026, we've seen craziness out of the White House, but you've also seen remarkably fast erosion in core bases of Trump support. Not as much as there needs to be, but enough that you and I now have something to talk about when we make these lists, because it's happening faster and faster every day.
Well, and the companies that didn't have a front row seat to his inauguration look smarter. The CEOs that have kept their heads under the radar look smarter too. So I was going to ask you about your former boss, as we are always telling people on this podcast, you worked for the Clinton administration. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have both been called in the by the Oversight Committee for the Epstein hearings, and they both appear to not be responding to the subpoenas, as far as I understand it. Do you have any sort of insight onto how do you have any insight into how they should be thinking of this Epstein business?
They should just, respond to subpoenas, ask for things to be public, conduct discussions in the public. They say they have nothing to hide. The big thing about people who have nothing to hide is don't act like you're hiding things.
Right. It's a great line. Why do people do that? Yes.
Well, I don't know. But, there's another line in Washington that's the oldest line in the book, which is, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. It's people, they're just afraid. I don't know, they have guilty consciences. I once had a conversation with Madeleine Albright when I was writing a book about something about Washington. And she said, we all have imposter syndrome. She said, we all feel like we don't really deserve this kind of big, powerful job. And I think, that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But I think a lot of people are like, well, I must have done something wrong, or they're going to come after me for something wrong or whatever. And let's be honest. There's a reason Bill Clinton has a guilty conscience. I don't know that he's committed a crime. I don't know that he did anything wrong with Jeffrey Epstein. But the guy, he colored outside the lines a lot.
He colored outside the lines a lot. That's a very good description. Did you know that while you were working with him?
I think people, yes. I think the short answer to that question is yes. People do it, because I would come up to people, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would run into women, and they would say, oh, well, I knew Clinton before the campaign, and he used to come to town, and then he'd call me at 11:30 at night, and he'd come up to my room, and he'd say, you want to do this, or you want to do that, and, it was only up to this certain kind of a thing, and he only wanted a certain kind. I'm not going to get more explicit here, and he only wanted a certain kind of a thing. The first woman who said that to me, I was like, that's gross. Why are you telling me this? But 3 different women told me the exact same story. And so it was very clear there was a pattern of behavior from Bill Clinton that was inappropriate, and was there was something unsavory going on there, But it was kind of a time where you're like, okay, well, let's grit our teeth, and we're fighting for a better world, and if he's going to help us get there, then let's use that. Clearly, his character flaws were so severe that he essentially risked his entire presidency for having a totally inappropriate relationship with a 24-year-old on his staff, and who, by the way, has covered herself in glory ever since by being honest and open and strong. Monica Lewinsky, who I know a little bit, and I really have a lot of respect for how she's handled it, because she's dealt with it. And, one of the things she's told me is he's never apologized.
Right. He's never apologized, and he still seems to be in a sort of cover-up mode, doesn't he? I mean, who knows what they're covering up, if there is anything to cover up at this point.
But it's the
squirrely kind of answers and the squirrely behavior. So tell me something, David. When you're working close to power like that, how do people who know things like this, how do they interact with each other? I mean, was this something that everybody talked about around Clinton? I think for a lot of people, when you're outside of a sphere of power, you don't understand how teams enable other people.
Well, there's a bubble mentality, and I think, these things happen gradually over time, and you add it up, and years later you say, well, I knew this, or this should have meant that, or the penny dropped. Was there talk? Yes, but I do remember that at the end of the Clinton presidency, and I don't know why we're litigating the very successful Clinton presidency when we have the worst president in our history destroying our country right now. But at the very end, the level of disappointment among his senior staff, among his cabinet secretaries, with what had happened and how he had handled it, was just over the top, because they felt that so much had been achieved, and they were so angry. And these are the most prominent members of his cabinet were so angry that he was willing to put it all at risk in order for this kind of low level of gratification. And I think one of the things you realize, particularly when you're dealing with people who want to be president of the United States, is that you have to be a little crazy to want to be president of the United States. It's kind of, you have to have this pathological need for power. So there's something broken if you were desperate enough to spend years and years seeking more power than any individual should have, and going through what it involves and making the compromises that it involves. And so every president is a little bit bent. Every president is a little broken. And that, does that mean, Barack Obama wasn't a good man trying to do good things? No, he was a good man trying to do good things. So was Bill Clinton. I can't say that about Donald Trump, but certainly George W. Bush tried hard to do good things. And, if you talk about immigration, George W. Bush proposed more immigration reform, better immigration reform than any president of the past 35 years. George W. Bush introduced PEPFAR. So he did the worst foreign policy disaster in our history, and he did some good things. There is some good in them, but they're a mixed bag. And you always have to ask yourself, with somebody who wants to be president or they want to be a billionaire,
Well, and also I was going to say how they select the teams around them.
Well, that's right. And a good president selects a team around them to make them a better president. And Donald Trump has reversed that. And he has, in this term of office, selected a team around him to provide the least possible resistance. He's not a team of rivals; it's a team of sycophants. And I wrote a book based on his first term in office, called American Resistance, in which I interviewed a lot of people in his cabinet, and they said what we fear is if he gets reelected again, he will use the experiences of his first term and weed out the sources of resistance that he resented. He will not have cabinet secretaries with independent points of view. He will get rid of inspector generals. He will not go through the Senate confirmation process, and he will get as many acting people in top jobs as he can, so he doesn't have to, worry so much about their backgrounds and can really worry about whether they are loyal. He will weed out loyalists who are career civil servants. And he will do all of these things at scale. And every warning that I got in that book, and these were from multiple people in his cabinet or his sub-cabinet, every one of them has come true, and to a greater degree than many of them had warned. Because Trump doesn't want advice and consent. He just wants consent.
And I would add, he just wants power.
That's all he wants. And it's not even that. Some people want power because they want the power to do good. I think Trump just wants to feel powerful.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things he said to Michael Wolff when Michael Wolff was interviewing him first time round, and he said, "Why do you want to be president?" He said, "I want to be the most famous man in the world." And it's hard not to think that that still drives him. So let me ask you a final question, David. Symptoms of autocracy often involve suppression of the press. Certainly in Russia, Eastern Europe, China, the press isn't as free as it is here. Yes, Donald Trump has restricted access to the White House press room, but in a sense they've just let their sycophantic press people in. And yet he sits down with an interview, a 2-hour interview with 4 reporters from the New York Times. What do you make of that?
First of all, I think we need to be honest with ourselves. No president has done more to restrict free access to information about the White House than Trump. Whether it's throwing people out who are credible journalists or bringing people in who are not credible journalists in terms of the White House, whether it's pumping out lies, whether it's controlling the social media accounts of cabinet departments through the White House, or whether it's going to his supporters and saying, buy this big media outlet, buy this other big media outlet, this massive MAGA takeover of mainstream media. This has been the worst year in terms of freedom of the press that the United States has ever seen.
Well, that's all true. But then inadvertently, because he wants to be on television so much and he's having endless press conferences and he's always available, perhaps this is inadvertent on his behalf, however, see him falling asleep, see him getting words confused, see him getting people confused, see him reading notes that have been put under his nose, which are clearly private. We inadvertently, perhaps, see him fully exposed.
I think that's right. I think that they will, frankly, he thinks still that, if he's on camera, he can solve any problem. I think increasingly he will realize he creates new problems and we'll see less and less of him. But, there's also this other thing, which is he has proven that he will go after people hard if they give him a hard time. And this has created, kind of a both sidesing impulse, which we've seen at the New York Times, right? We've seen in the headlines at the New York Times. And I think he thought, well, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to record the whole thing and they're going to be here. And, they did a 2-hour interview. They didn't ask about the Epstein files.
Right. And interestingly, there was a piece by David Brooks, the columnist David Brooks, over the weekend that basically said it's all just sort of liberals' fault. Everything is liberals' fault. That's why we're in this mess. Well,
shoot me. Or better yet, just stop yourself. Don't read another piece by David Brooks. There is no value. There is no value. This kind of regular apologia. The thing that drives him to berserk about the David Brooks kind of pieces is he's like, well, I'm not part of all that. But of course, David Brooks and the other conservative columnists made Trump possible. They set all of this up. And now they're like, holy crap, Brooks is like, often, well, I found God and all this other kind of stuff. But this set of columnists need to be tuned out. Brooks, Russ Doubted, some of these other characters at the Times. I thought some of the Times interview was useful, and I thought some of it was too bland. I don't think they were hard enough on a lot of these issues of authoritarianism, which are they're really crucial because we are moving into a period where democracy is really at stake. And I don't see how you get by, dealing with things like the Epstein thing. I don't know whether they had ground rules or not. But, was it better that they did it than not? Yes. And did he reveal himself to be, flawed in manifold ways doing it? Yes, he did. And they teased that out.
Well, and I thought Katie Rogers had the best question in terms of what would stop you. And he said, well, the only thing that would stop me is my own morality.
Well, right. And I mean, amazing. Everybody.
Right. And I'm amazing they didn't come back to him and say, well, you were best friends with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, well, right. Or, or don't come back to him and say, that is precisely the frame of mind of every totalitarian leader in history. And what you're saying is that you're above the law and the only thing that is stopping you is your own conscience. And famously, you don't have a conscience. You're only being stopped by your own morality, and famously, you're the most immoral public figure in America. But they don't test it. One of the things about journalists that drives me crazy these days is they don't follow up these questions in the way that they should. And I don't think they did in that case, even though from the point of view of you and me and everybody who's listening to this, when you hear the president say, the only constraint on my behavior is my own morality, every red light should be flashing. We have entered totalitarianism. We have entered authoritarianism. The man who said he'd be a dictator on day one lived up to the promise, and he just thinks that he can do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, however he wants. And that's what we're up against between now and whenever somebody gets some of that power away from him, hopefully in November.
David Rothkopf, that is a very rousing start to the week. I am taking to the streets, sir. I am taking to the streets. It's always fantastic to see you. I can see that you are very fired up. And as you say, the first 10 days of 2026 have been like a compressed version of the entire of 2025. David, promise me that you will come back and fire us up again soon.
You're the boss. You invite me, I'll be here.
Okay, and I wasn't expecting the diversion into the Clinton era, but it's always incredibly helpful to hear from people who've worked close to power how the enablers work. I'm always fascinated by it.
The enabling is sort of, every court you've ever read about in history. Everybody in the court does some currying favor because by being in the court, they are elevated. It's in their interest to play to the bubble thinking of that court.
It's fascinating. Well, the bubble thinking at the Daily Beast, David, has you as a very popular podcast guest. So thank you very much for coming on, and we will talk to you urgently next week or the week after.
Okay, I will only show up for a bag of Doritos.
Bag of Doritos on the way.
All right, thank you.
All right. So there you have it. David Rothkopf is on full volume. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to it. Feel free to subscribe to the Daily Beast too, so we can bring you nanosecond by nanosecond updates of what's going on. It's Sunday night. It must be Jerome Powell taking to social media to tell you what's going on. It's crazy out there, as we all know. Don't forget to leave us a comment on YouTube. We love hearing your point of view, and it really does inform the conversations that we have here at The Beast. So if you're a regular commentator or you're just an occasional commentator, it's absolutely fine. But don't think that we don't read them, because we do. And we have a message from Kevin Fallon.
Joanna, hi. I have to tell you about something that we're obsessed with. I'm Kevin Fallon. And I'm Matt Wilstein.
And we are hosting Obsessed, the podcast, about all the TV shows, movies, and entertainment newsmakers that we're all obsessed with. So make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube at the YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just search for Obsessed, the podcast.
And we will see you there.
Big thanks to our special B-Beast tier of members. Here they are. Yvette Johnson, Methinks, Batsy O'Farrell, Mills and Linz, Shelby, Max Cubitt, I've been mispronouncing that, sorry about that, Max, David Sherry, Thomas Moore, Maria Voltaine, Dee, I think it's Cuja Watts, but Dee, feel free to tell us how to pronounce your name, Sinya Lund, John H. Overocker, Deb K. Ostrander, Sandra Clark, Travels with Carl, Andrew Beaver, Capinator, Harry Clark, Dawn McCarthy, Daniel Dog Lover, M. Greiner, Die Stone, Fulvia Orlando, Herbie, Andrew Meller, Tatnell, Val Love Francisco, that's an odd name, Will Hutchison, Andrea Hodel, Bocock DC, Sharon Shipley, Connie Rutherford, Karen White, and last but never least, Heidi Riley. And to our production team, Devon Rogerino, Ryan Murray, and Heather Passaro.